I'm so honored to be here with all of you this evening, and I couldn't even begin to express my gratitude for Evie Lease and her family and army of volunteers and supporters who have talk about believing big. What you've created, your tenacity and your fearlessness in creating something like this is unbelievable, and I get to witness the impact of that from this point of view. I'm also incredibly grateful for the Johns Hopkins crew that you also are taking a huge leap of faith in working with something that's not in the norm in our typical way of doing things in medicine in the United States. So I'm incredibly grateful to be here with all of you as well. I've been asked to share my own individual approach to integrative oncology, as well as my own journey with cancer and helping my patients with their journey with cancer. My method is unique because of that journey. I think I can probably have a few of you relate to that experience of when you have this happen to you yourself, it changes things for you forever. So join me as I weave together my own experience, my own journey, the gifts that I've been given, and the way I impact others with that knowledge from something that was a tragedy to something that has ultimately changed my life for the better. At 19 years old, almost 20, I was given an expiration date, like a carton of milk, a little bit longer though, 3 to 6 months versus a few weeks. I was filled with ascites, metastatic lesions, unbelievable pain and nausea, muscle wasting, severe malnourishment. No one could look me in the eye when they finally expressed their condolences and told me that nothing I could do would change the outcome. And though willing to begin treatment, they gave me the contact for hospice, as they thought the state that I was in, chemotherapy and surgery, would ultimately hasten my demise. It had taken countless doctors over 6 months to stop making assumptions and defaulting to writing scripts from A, anxiolytics, to Z, zithromycin. Finally, I was blessed with an ER doctor who allowed me the time to share the chronology of my symptoms and truly listen. He finally performed a proper physical exam, ran more comprehensive labs and a variety of scans, but by then it was too late. The doctor literally cried when he told me what he'd found. Ironically, I found myself comforting him because I was the same age as his daughter. In hindsight, as a clinician, I understand why my diagnosis evaded so many. That was not common finding in those days, to be a 19-year-old with stage 4 ovarian cancer. Uninsured and out of options, before internet and long before Dr. Google, it was up to me to find hope where no one else found any. It pushed me to go deep within myself to find that inner strength that's been spoken to tonight, and a will to live that simply hadn't been there for me before. The diagnosis of a terminal cancer suddenly shook me awake. I was faced with a question, much like many of you, in the famous lyrics from the iconic punk group, The Clash, should I stay or should I go now? Along with my unfortunate epigenetics that it took me until 2013 to learn more about, I also was given the gift of extreme stubbornness and a belief that I would not be a statistic. Perhaps it was my age and my naivete, but at that time in my life, I embodied the old adage that Evie spoke to a moment ago: for those who say it can't be done, get out of the way of the people who are doing it. Exactly. Leaving no stone unturned, a 3-month going out fighting attitude has turned into almost a 25-year journey, standing here before you. Thank you. My initial reaction to this is actually what empowered me and moved me forward and frankly gave me my purpose in life. And it was anger, of all things. I was angry at the doctors for taking so long to figure out what was going on, and for misdiagnosing, dismissing, condescending, and accusing me of being a hypochondriac. I was angry with myself for not paying closer attention. I was angry with God. That rage, however, was a bit misdirected, externally on anything and everything in my wake. But I knew I somehow had a choice, whether I was going to let that anger move me forward or take me down. And in Chinese medicine, the emotion of anger, another perspective of anger, is that it is simply the will to become. It was just the match I needed to light my own internal fire. And for many years following my diagnosis and the quest for my cure, I carried this burden almost entirely alone, like a dirty little secret. I intuitively knew that telling others would not help and would possibly hinder any chance I had for survival, because I chose a very different route than many of you today. The few occasions I shared my experience with others, I was met with pity, disbelief, judgment, a lot of well-meaning but frankly bad advice. I knew one thing for sure: I did not want to be, nor do I now want to be labeled as a cancer patient. 4.5 years later, still kicking, in medical school, I vowed to never work with cancer again. Naturopathic medical school offered me a safe haven of exploring my own health and healing while mastering the basic sciences, nutrition, diet, lifestyle modification, homeopathy, mind-body techniques, hands-on healing. Thanks to a lot of incredible teachers and mentors, I applied their knowledge to myself first before practicing it on others. It's definitely made me the doctor I am today and inspired in me a very voracious appetite to keep learning and the ability to weave it all together in a unique way. Fast forward to spring of 2001, that initial vow that I told you about. A few months into my private practice, a gentleman rolled into my office in a wheelchair. He could no longer speak, no ability to walk, no control over his bowels or bladder, extreme pain that was untouched by narcotics, and dealing with severe hydrocephaly that had literally closed off the ventricles in his brain, thanks to his glioblastoma multiforme. He came to me for end-of-life care and pain management. His diagnosis was in April. It was now June, and he was a matter of days from dying. Jeff and I set off on an adventure that took him another 4 months beyond that point, where he got his pain and brain swelling under control, despite the fact that the scans still showed his ventricles were completely closed. We are still stunned by that one. We accomplished this with acupuncture and homeopathy, got him out of the wheelchair and walking with his kids every day, got him on a therapeutic ketogenic diet, well before it became popular again, got him out of diapers and back to day-to-day function, and spent hours discussing and making peace with what he thought to be the cause of his predicament, a very traumatic childhood and rage at the abusers that were no longer living. Jeff healed like no other into his dying process. 2 days before his passing, he went on a drive with his family to enjoy the fall colors. His wife and 3 children curled up next to him at home on the night he finally launched at peace. And his most valuable lesson: we are all able to heal. Not all of us will be cured. He changed my life and added another piece of healing to my own process, one of forgiveness. Quite a healing balm. For 24 years, I've traveled all over the world, studied with experts in Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, naturopathic medicine, indigenous shamans, allopathic medicine, simply seeking the magic pill, as are all of you, I'm sure. I've witnessed countless miracles, such as Kathy, with her stage 4 breast cancer metastasized to her bones, liver, lung, after 6 failed attempts of chemo and clinical trials, sent home to hospice. After she attended several rounds of a traditional Native American sweat lodge filled with prayer, she's still here 12 years later. Or Tina, with her multiple rounds of chemo and trials for her stage 4 ovarian cancer, undergo a trial for something called whole body perfusion hyperthermia, in which they put her under sedation, take her blood out of her body, heat it to 104.7 degrees, filter it through something like a dialysis machine, and put it back in. The doctors, when they let me sit in on this, they said I was the only doctor that ever actually asked to touch the tube. I wanted to feel that heat. They were so shocked that I asked her, like, of course, by all means, feel it. But this woman, 2 years later, is almost completely resolved of extreme disease burden, totally stable and feeling great. And then there's Eve, who traveled to Germany to obtain her IV mistletoe for end-of-life care while saying goodbye to her European family after several treatments for her stage 4 endometrial clear cell carcinoma. It left her with extensive metastasis and no other options. That was over 2 years ago, and her scans are clear and she is thriving. And she's the inspiration for why I'm standing up here, actually. People always ask me, what is the one thing that you did in your life or for somebody else's life that saved them or yourself? I get that question all the time. It's easy to be seduced by the idea that any one of these individuals, myself included, found a miracle in a single treatment. However, they all approached their cancering process, as did I, exploring all parts of the mind, the body, the spirit, the physiology, the epigenetics, the lifestyle and the diet, anything that needed your attention, far beyond the tumor and the tumor cell. It's very easy to become the cancer diagnosis. There is a delicate balance here. You see, we all have cancer, all of us. There's no such thing as being cancer-free. However, these cells are listening intently and waiting for our cues. When they hear fear, as Evie Lee said earlier, that's like fuel. That sympathetic nervous system is a driver for metastatic process. When these cells are put under the spotlight and obsessed over day in and day out, they have no impetus to go into quiescence. Or if they're simply ignored and brushed under the rug, they'll work harder to make themselves heard. In the mid to late 1800s, a German physician, Dr. Rudolf Virchow, understood cancer to be a wound-healing process gone awry, a process our own body overshot in an attempt to protect us. Why then, over 70 years, would we further launch an all-out war on this evolutionary, self-protecting mechanism that instead is in need of having itself recognized, responded to, and remembered? That's the foundation of immunology. Take for the example the enigma that most of my patients, and probably all of you in this room as well, tell me that they were healthy until they were diagnosed with cancer. Can you relate? And yet I can't think of a single case where that is true. Once these cancer cells are deeply listened to and understood via laboratory testing, dietary diaries, molecular profiling, epigenetic testing, etc., we go digging, we gather clues of where the cancering began. And then, when given the necessary tools to metabolically change those cells back to a state of balance, with such things as oxidative therapies and cytotoxic therapies, mistletoe, therapeutic diets, stress reduction, resolution of nutritional deficiencies and excesses, that's when we begin to manage cancer and in many ways put it into a state of remission. And furthermore, I know we talked about this earlier, I have found over the last 25 years and thousands of patients later that there is always festering emotional wounds that also seek our attention and resolution. Carolyn Mace articulates this beautifully. When an illness is a part of your spiritual journey, no medical intervention can heal you until your spirit has begun to make changes that the illness was designed to inspire. Simply put, as said before, most folks can land in this place, in a place of complacency, denial, or disconnect. Cancer will take root in half of all men and a third of all women in their lifetime. And yet it's always a shock when one is diagnosed. In fact, one would say that the real medical emergency is the diagnosis itself. I liken it to an ultimate wake-up call. How you choose to respond may have the greatest impact on your outcome than any treatment you choose. By the controversial Rudiger Dahlke from the book The Power of Illness, he states, ultimately we have to find ourselves, and our diseases can help us with that. In the era of the ome, such as the epigenome, the microbiome, we are moving deeper into the concept of personalized medicine, now backed by the White House initiative of the Precision Medicine Initiative, also known as moonshots. This concept, however, has been around for thousands of years and many healing traditions, and in my own practice for 25 years. Things like mistletoe therapy for immunomodulating has been utilized for nearly 100 years, and so much of our work in immunotherapies today was based on William B. Coley, Dr. William B. Coley's work in the late 1800s. What is old is new again. There is momentum in the field of epigenetics, where DNA modifications are impacted by internal and external changes or triggers from our diet, our environment, our medications, even ancestral famines and traumas, and definitely our current and present thoughts and emotions. Research is finally catching up with these theories as they've been around for many decades, and the result, empowerment. We may be born with our genes, but we can harness our potential and change our destiny. My own brush with death 25 years ago has me carrying a few valuable tools I strive to apply to myself and others that are far more important than any particular treatment or modality. Be present in any given moment. Truly listen to yourself and others. Connect with your inner strength. Be stubborn and refuse to be a statistic. Find your purpose. Forgive. Be a detective and curious about your own physiology and psychology. Truly embrace life, even in the final moments. I can't imagine now my life without cancer, after trying to shove it so far out of my existence. I can't imagine being afraid of such a diagnosis. I can't imagine living without hope. As Emily Dickinson wrote in 1924, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. So I leave you with the granddaddy of all questions, beyond the stories, beyond my own experience, beyond the things we can do, take, treat, or remove. What is cancer trying to heal in you? Thank you, and be well.